Yeah, it is started, Vivek. So hello everyone. Welcome to Global Biz Apps Day 2020, powered by D65 Champs. I'm Ankush Grover. I, along with Kuldeep Gupta, will be moderating this session. This session is presented by Geetha Sivasailam. Geetha will be talking about introduction to product Oakdale. Geetha is a MVP and is having 10 plus years of consulting experience, delivering business solutions, leveraging Microsoft business applications, and various emerging technologies such as cloud, IoT, etc. Her technical expertise includes SharePoint and Office 365, Power Apps, Power Automate, Azure, IoT, SQL Server, Azure DevOps, etc. Before I hand over the session to Geetha, I would like to mention that if you have any questions, please feel free to drop it in the chat window and we'll take that either during the session if possible or during the Q&A time. Thank you again for joining and enjoy the session. Geetha, over to you.
Thank you, Ankush. Thanks for the introduction there. And hello, everybody. And I hope you're having a great time watching and learning from all these amazing sessions and speakers that we have lined up here. And I think there are a stellar set of speakers coming up next as well. And thank you for taking the time on a Saturday or Sunday, whichever part of the world you're from. And there's several things you could do on a weekend, but you chose to be part of this event. So thanks for that. And so my session today is going to be an introduction to Project Oakdale. And let's take a look at what our agenda looks like. So we'll be getting an overview. I'll walk you through an overview of what Project Oakdale is. We'll create a simple app and look how things are a bit different in the studio, the embedded Power App Studio that comes with Project Oakdale, experience within Microsoft Teams, and compare it with the regular Power App Studio and see what you should know when you start building apps. And we'll also look at how to view environments and capacity and how you can go manage your artifacts that come with this new storage called Project Oakdale within Microsoft Teams. Before we get started, just a little bit about myself. Yes, Ankush pretty much covered all my intro, but just wanted to add also a dev consultant. I'm based out of Dallas, Texas. I work for Artist Consulting, a Microsoft partner. I'm also a co-founder for the Dallas Fort Worth Power Apps and Power Automate UG. And I know right now all groups are virtual, so anyone is on all skill levels are always welcome to join us anytime. And I frequently share my learnings and experiences with the tool sets under the Power Platform ecosystem. So feel free to connect with me on Twitter or follow my blog posts. I'm always happy to help and do the best I can. So just a quick overview of what Project Oakdale is. Project Oakdale has been the buzzword since it was released in public preview very recently and originally called DataFlex. But what it really is a lighter version of CDS. And as of today, it's still called Project Oakdale, and I'm pretty sure there's gonna be a new name for it, but we just don't know that yet. And it's a built-in, flexible, and a relational data storage for Microsoft Teams. It supports file storage and one-click style deployments of solutions. And it enables all Power App makers and your Power Virtual Agent chatbot creators to design and build and manage your apps and bots directly within Teams. And you can use the embedded Power App Studio experience without any additional licensing costs. So if you have a Teams license and the user is creating the apps, it has a Teams license assigned, then they are free to create apps within and using the Power App Studio experience within the Microsoft Teams. And these apps that you build within Teams are also responsive to form factor as they're loaded, and Teams also this experience within Teams also helps you automate your business processes with Power Automate for Office 365 and other services. Any premium connectors that your users are licensed for, you could still use Power Automate within this experience. And you can also work with any of the Project Oakdale data that you've been using for data storage. And all of this comes without any additional licensing, as long as you have your seated Office 365 license and your Teams license assigned. A couple of things to note: it's excluded in certain plans. So Project Oakdale is not available in a few US environments like the Common Cloud, DoD, and also a few EDU related A1 and sub SKUs that it's not available yet, at least when it's in public preview. So now let's take a quick talk a little bit about how all of this works together. So each Project Oakdale environment uniquely maps to a team's team. So it's kind of like a one-to-one relationship. And you can store up to 1 million records based on a typical usage. So every time you have an environment, every time you create an app, or if you're the first person creating an app, it will start setting up your environment with Project Oakdale artifacts behind the scenes. So each team will have an environment created. And then the way security works is it goes with the acronym OMG. So you have your owners, members, and guests, and teams pretty much covers who can create and use the apps. So owners have full control and members can contribute. And it really does align with the core roles that you have defined in the environment. And a couple of, everything comes with a little bit of limitations. So, we talked about how a single environment only lets you create about 1 billion roles, which is equivalent to 2 GB of storage. But at the same time, you have support for up to 500 teams in preview, which means you have about close to 1 TB of storage that you can use. Now, if you need to go above that, and if you feel like your data storage is going to exceed that, then you will have to true up to the full-fledged CDS experience. We'll talk a little bit about that when we get to our demo. So let's take a quick look at our demo here. I'm going to open up Microsoft Teams. So I'm on the web version of Microsoft Teams, and I have a team created for our demo today. And the first thing you would want to do when you want to create apps using the Project Oakdale environment is that you go to the little ellipsis here and go look for Power Apps. Now, if you don't, in my case, I've already built some, so I see it. But if you don't see it, you can always search for it, and that should pull it up. And when you click on it, it should open up landing page for the preview version of Power Apps, which is embedded within Microsoft Teams. You will notice that it also has a couple of templates, employee ideas, inspection, and issue reporting. So that's a great place to start if you want to see how things work. You can click on them or pick one of the templates and just create one of the apps, and that will build all the artifacts. That comes with all of the artifacts that it needs behind the scenes and stores all of the data in Project Oakdale environments that's created for that specific team where you're embedding it in. And you can play around with it and see how that's been built. And there's also Microsoft Learn resources over there, which are great if you want a good starting point or a learning guide to help you get started. But let's go ahead and create an app. Now, if this is the first time you're creating an app for a Teams channel, what's going to happen is it'll take a while for it to start spinning up all the artifacts and setting up your environment behind the scenes. But if you've already created one, it should be pretty soon. And for first time setup of the environment, what it does is it also sends an email to the team owner saying that it has actually generated an environment for that team. So in my case, I'm going to go ahead and pick this team over here. And I'm going to say I want to create an app in my demo team. And that immediately takes me to my Power Apps Embedded Studio, and it's going to pull that up, and it's just getting everything set up behind the scenes so it can tie this Power Apps to that specific instance of the team that I want to be building it for. And so there we have. So there is our studio. So this actually is embedded just right within your Microsoft Teams, and you don't even need to navigate anywhere away. So you're right within the context of your Teams environment. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to call this my events management app. We'll go ahead and create a simple events management app where we can track and manage events that are coming and assign it to coordinators and things like that. So we'll just keep it let's go ahead and save that. I'm just going to give a app name. Let's let it save. And you'll notice that a couple of things are different from how they are in the regular Power App Studio. So at the top, you'll notice there is not a file menu, but instead you have all these options here where you can add a data source, you can drop in a new screen. The app checker has moved towards the left. The regular studio usually has it on the right. And then you have your settings where you can actually go and set up your advanced settings or your name, your icons, and your screen size setup. And then you also have the ability to look at your collections or variables and also look at any Power Automate flows that are assigned or used within your Power App that you're creating. On the left here, you'll notice this hasn't changed too much. I mean, the one thing that's not here is the monitor app, the monitor icon that you would have in your regular studio, where you can actually track performance and, track down the different calls, API endpoints that are being called from your Power Apps, or every call that you make to a data source, and all those network traces. No, you don't have that option here. But then you'll notice in the center, it actually did create a template, a generic template with a gallery view, and it comes with like a parent-child view. So it already dropped in a gallery with some sample data, and then it enabled some CRUD operations there for me. I can manage, or I can update my existing or edit my existing items here. I can create a new one, or I can delete. So it does a pretty good job of already setting that up for you. But right now it's just pointing to a sample data source. Now we do have to point it to a new data set. So what I'm going to do is I am going to go ahead and create a new table. So I don't have any data storage tables created in this environment, so I don't see anything here yet. So let's go ahead and see what that experience looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and create an events app. And so we're going to just go ahead and create a table called events. And you'll notice that the terminology is a little different here. Now it's called tables instead of entities. And the reason for that is to abstract the whole, for just to make it more intuitive for users who are jumping on this to create relational data storage for apps. So they've, made it a little more simpler for them to get on board with creating apps within, or even creating tables within this environment. So here I have the name column is right there. So I'm going to leave that in. I'm going to have an event date. So when I add a new column, these are the types of data types that I have available, but you're not limited to these. We'll take a look at where you can go look at several other data types as well. But these are the base set of data types that are available for you. So I'm going to go ahead and say this is going to be my date. And let's go ahead and create it. So you have an embedded GUI where you can just go ahead and create your tables. And so we have a name and an event. And then what I'm going to do is also create another column. Let's try event type. And I'm going to say choice because I want to specify what my choices are. You also have the ability to color code them if you want to differentiate and filter and parse through your data. So let me go ahead and say, okay, this, I'm going to say it can either be a webinar or it can be a workshop, or it's a panel style event. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and create that. And now I have these three columns. And now you'll notice that you can start adding rows or adding columns, and you can choose to show and hide. But you can also start adding data right here. So I'm going to say, let's say we have an event in November. I'm going to just call it a November event, and I'm going to pick a date, and I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to go for November 10th, and my event type is going to be a webinar. And let's go ahead and create another one. And as I create, you'll notice that it actually is saving my data right there. I don't have to hit save, it's auto saving it. And then let's go ahead and do another date over here for our December event. I'll go ahead and pick another date, and then I'm going to call this as a workshop event. And then now all of my data is saved. So you do have to navigate away from that row for that to be saved. And then what you can also do is look at show and hide columns, and that shows you a bunch of other columns that are system generated. So I can choose to see who created it, who modified it, when it was modified, and then also who the owner is on that record. So right now it actually dropped in everything. So I'm just going to exit out of this, and then you'll notice that as soon as I exit, the Power App Studio knows that this table that I'm creating is in context of that app that I'm building. And so it will automatically pull in that data source and mark it as a data source to be used within the studio. So let's go ahead and exit that. And you'll notice that it's loading that. And then just watch over here what it does is it actually pulled all of my data that I just added. So how cool is that? Within 5 minutes, within less than 5 minutes, you can actually build an app from scratch and create a table. So it does all the job for you. So it dropped in my parent-child relationship, kind of this template that we have here. It dropped in my data, and if you actually look at this gallery, it actually marked that table as the data source. And I can also preview this, and it shows me the data for the selected item. I can choose to edit it. Let's say I want to say this is going to be of type panel, and I can save it. So all of that work is already done. Now, this is just a base template that it created for you, right? You should also be able to create new items as well. So we'll just go ahead and create a new one, and just look at a experience over here, and notice how the date control works. It's so much different from how your regular Power App Studio works. I know at least I have had that pain point where, as a user, you go pick a date with the regular Power App Studio. There used to be an OK button that you have to click on and to actually confirm or commit or persist to that data. But now they've changed that experience here. So let's go ahead and just pick a date in Jan over here. I'm just going to do that. And then, yeah, just going to save that. All right. We have that saved. So I do see my new Jan event over here. And then what I'm going to do now is I wanted to talk a little bit about just how this whole studio works. So if you notice, we looked at how that little date control is different. So what Microsoft's done is that they've included a new modern set of controls based on Fluent UI as part of Power Apps and Dreams Preview. So these controls enable your makers to create apps which more closely align with Microsoft patterns and styles. And those classic controls, if you remember, like in the regular studio, often had some property names that seemed a little strange. And then you have your classic, for example, like your toggle control would have a property called checked. And for that, you would have to go, the property was called default in it if you have to check it. But now with the modern experience, they have that actually called checked. So it's just more easier for us to relate to the actual intention of that property. So we'll take a look at some of the controls just to see how the Fluent UI actually does improve the maker experience and also for people consuming the apps. So I'm going to go ahead and drop a button over here. Let me go ahead and drop a button. So here I have my button, and then what we have here is a primary, and you'll notice that we have a button type that says primary or standard. Now that is a Fluent UI based property. When I have primary, it has a look and feel that's more closer to Teams, and then when I say standard, that's more closer to your regular out of very plain style over there. And then you'll notice that this also has an accepts focus. That's the kind of property names that I've changed that I talked about. In the regular studio, this is an equivalent of the tab index where you can say, you can tab on this control. So now they've called it accept focus, and it actually makes it easier to understand what these properties are for. And you notice a couple of such new property names popping up with different controls. And I mean, out of all, my favorite is definitely the date control, because now it's one click less. You just pick a date and you have the date. Now let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and save this because I haven't saved it from the first time. And I will go ahead and also publish it. And then sorry, bear with me. I'm just going to grab my charger. I just realized I'm losing charge. All right. So here, when I'm going to go ahead and publish it, what I see is I can click next, and I want to publish it to Teams. So let's go back here. Let's give it a few minutes. And what I have here is it's actually showing me the different tabs that we have here. So what I can do is I can click on the tab and I can say I want to add this as a tab to this channel. So depends on how many channels you have within your team. So I'm going to go ahead and save and close. And when I do that, it actually is going to drop a tab with the app within that channel. So now I already have that embedded, so we'll take a look at that in a bit. But before that, there's another cool thing that I wanted to show you. and that's the context within Teams. So if you notice, there is an integration point here at the top called Teams. And if you worked with the Power BI integration or SharePoint integration, you would find that familiar, because when you have your SharePoint customized forms, it would have that SharePoint integration, which tells you that this app that you're building is within the context of that SharePoint form. And it would do the same thing even for any embedded custom visuals within Power BI, and would have a PBI integration point as well. So that's our sign that this actually is working within the context of Teams. And you can also get the context of your Teams channel within the app. So for example, if you have multiple apps and you want to capture which Teams or channel this data is coming from, or you have some kind of a business process where you need to be able to track that, then you can do that as well. So let's go ahead and create a new label. I am going to go and drop in a label over here, and all you have to do is just call the Teams property, and then right now I need to extend it, and you'll notice that I have a couple of things here. And I'm going to say I want to grab this channel, and then I want to grab the ID for this channel. So now at the top we have that. Right now we're not seeing it because it's not running inside within the context of Teams yet. This is just still the studio, but we will see it once we actually publish it. So I'm going to go ahead and publish it, and in a bit we'll go take a look at how that looks like. So right now you can see that this actually shows me the tabs where I already have it. So I don't have to go and drop another one. So I can just say, yes, that's the tab where I want to publish this, and then I'm going to go ahead and save that. Another thing to note here is also this little drop down. This does the same thing. It actually lets you manage your pins, so you can manage where you want to drop your tabs depending on the channel here. So that's another way to get to it. Another thing to remember is that you can change your app name right here. But if you change it, any of the tabs that have been pinned for this app will have to be manually changed within Teams, just like how anything else would work with tabs in Teams. One other important or a favorite thing to note, one of my favorites over here is, let's go back to the Screens tab. See these two containers. It's called a left container and a right container. Now that comes as part of the Fluid UI framework as well. And this came in by default. It dropped in a right container and it dropped in a left container. They also make elements within the containers more responsive. Containers, if you remember, are still an experimental feature in the Power Apps regular studio, but it actually is available for us to use in the Teams experience. So I guess that means that it's coming soon for our regular Power Apps Studio as well. Now within our left and right containers, I'll show you the difference. One of the big differences between containers and groups. So if you're used to the concept of grouping, so let's say I dropped a label control and a button control. Now I can actually go ahead and right click them, and you still have the ability to group them. So we have that. So it's grouped here. Now let me go ahead and drop another, let's say I want to drop an image, for example. So I have an image now. So let's go back to our screen. And so now I have so this actually dropped my image directly within the container because I had that selected. Now, if you want to move controls, so let's say I want to move this, I can say copy, I can come here and I can say paste. And what that does is it seamlessly did a copy paste of it within containers, and it didn't complain about not being able to do that. But the experience is a little different with groups. So because when you do that, groups are kind of like restricted. Once you have it as a group, you can paste anything in. It just drops it outside of the group, and you have to ungroup them and then add them back. So that's another difference between containers and groups. And you would want to make sure that you are within containers as well if you want them to be more responsive with the form factor. So remember to do that. And let's go ahead. I'm just going to go ahead and delete this. I'm going to publish it one more time before I move away from here. All right, we have that published, and now I'm going to navigate away, and I'm going to go ahead and look at my Teams. So let's get back to Teams and see how it already did drop a tab for me, events management, and then it pulls up the app within the context. And I can see my app right here, and there is our ID that I dropped. So now it knows that this is the specific team that I'm using this app for. Now, if you want a full web experience for it, you can also do that by just clicking on the web icon over there, and that pulls up the full web player for you if that's something that you would prefer to have. So that's possible too. Now let's look at how you can go and manage these apps and artifacts that you build, right? So let's go back. One important thing that you would want to do is that you pin it here so that you have an easy way to go back to it whenever you need it. So now it's pinned, and I always have a way to go back to manage my apps that I've built within the Teams experience. So here, there is a tab called Build. So this is where you would want to come to if you want to manage all your apps and or flows or whatever that you build within your or even chatbots that you build within your teams. So here it lists all my teams, and you can see that I have a bunch of apps that I've already created, and then I have a couple of other things that I've been playing with, and then now this is the one that okay. This is the one that was new. I hadn't seen that pop up before. You have to remember that things are in public preview, so they're constantly pushing changes. And so we should expect to see things evolving and changing as well. So here is our demo team, and I can see that I have a table, and then I have my app. And let's go ahead and look at how this experience looks like. So when I click see all, this gives me this overview of everything that's available within that team, anything that's available in that environment that was created within that team. So I can look at my apps right here. I can look at any chatbots. I can also look at flows as well. And then I have access to create or manage my tables from this experience. And if you are familiar with working with CDS, then you'd probably know that this looks very familiar to actually working with the native CDS look and feel. So this is, and if you're comfortable with this, then this is, and if you prefer to work with this experience, then you can always do so. This lists your relationships and views. Now, one thing you want to note here is when you actually add a column, and if you go to the data type, now you have a bunch of additional set of data types available as well. So you can definitely make use of this interface here if you want to go ahead and create columns that are not available in the regular GUI that's provided with your embedded data editing interface. So that's something I wanted to call out. And one other thing I also wanted to call out is for your flows. So if you want to build a flow, one option is to come here and then start building your flows. It has your options to build the 3 different types of triggers over here. So let's say I'm going to go ahead and build an automated one. So I'm just going to show you a quick example. Not really going to build it all out because we have a couple of other things to cover as well. So here I can choose to go look for, go ahead and, yes, it's supposed to, well, I'll just skip that and just try and create one. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead and do CDS, and I'm going to say this is going to be my current environment, and it will, if this is the in this channel, this Teams channel, this environment is the first time I'm setting it up. So it's actually creating that connector and doing all of the good work behind the scenes. And you can choose to, it works just like your regular CDS triggers that you would work with, and you can pick the entity. Now you would want to notice that here it's still called entity, but in the UI, they've changed the terminology to be tables. So that's just something to keep in mind, that behind the scenes, there's still entities, because it's still CDS behind the scenes. So then now you can search for your entity that you built, and so here is my events, and then you can choose your scope and so far. Another experience that I want to walk you through is that you're not forced to use Flow just within the embedded experience. You can also go to the FlowMaker portal, And if you go to environments, because each team gets an environment built, you'll notice that there is a team's environment built for that. Sorry, there is an environment for that Teams channel that I built. So here you can come and start creating flows, and it works. So it's tied to that environment. All of them get stored in that in Project Oakdale that's associated to that environment with those teams. So that's another way if you want to start using, if you're familiar, or if you prefer to work with the full experience over here. But the one difference is when you get to the Power Apps Maker portal, and if you come to the environments, you will not see your teams-based environments here. So because I think that's their way to enforce you to use the Power Apps embedded studio that comes with your Teams experience. All right, so we've looked at that. So now what I'm going to do is go ahead and walk you through how you can go look at your environments and then what's available out of the box with your capacity viewing and things like that. So when I'm in my Power Platform Admin Center, I can see all my environments, and you'll notice that there's a new type called Microsoft Teams. So these tell me that these are my Teams-based environments, and I can look at any apps that have been built or any flows or any all of the artifacts that have been built. I can actually look at that. And if you want to look at your capacity, you can come to resources, and then you look at your capacity, and then here you'll notice that there is a tab for Microsoft Teams capacity usage. And here you'll see this shows me all the environments that I have, and it also shows me that each environment has 2 GB of capacity, and it shows me the amount of percentage of data that I've already used in that storage. So that's the one. Now, a couple of things to note there is that if it exceeds, it just sends you a notification, and then it disables some of the functionality within your environments. And we'll talk a little bit about it in detail in our next slide. So that's just a good overview, of very high level overview of how you can use the Project Oakdale environment. Now you can create apps where you can go build your flows, and also how the whole studio works in general compared to your regular studio, and where you can come and manage this. And also, I think one thing I missed to share is that the Power Apps COE starter kit does have a component for your Teams-based environments as well. So I don't have that here to show you, but what that does is when you have that installed and running, you do have the ability to go look at a separate tab for Teams where you can go look at the usage and pull and perform governance over there. So let's get back to our slides here. Now that we've looked at all of this, there's a couple of things I wanted to walk you guys through. So I curated some of the most common questions that I had when this first came out, and also questions that I'm seeing in the community that keep coming up depending on their usage. So I thought I'll use this as a good time to also share some of the frequently asked questions and what you should keep in mind when you start building out things or start implementing Project Oakdale for your projects going forward. So the first one over there is, can you use your Project Oakdale data outside of Teams? No, you cannot, because Project Oakdale is designed to work within Teams. But if you want to use that data outside, if you want to use it outside, you will have to promote to your full-fledged CDS experience. So right now in public preview, there is not a way, it doesn't have an out-of-the-box way to go ahead and promote it, but I think it's coming pretty soon. Our second frequently asked question right there is, can I use custom connectors in Project Oakdale? So custom connectors are not supported, at least in public preview. You do not have the ability to use them, but they recently announced that there is going to be support for Azure API management coming up, which will be available for Project Oakdale, which means you could potentially have your custom connectors surfaced via APIM in Azure, and then use that as your way to connect to custom connectors via Project Oakdale. Now, that is also free, in the sense free to use within the context of your teams. But of course, you're going to be paying for the Azure resources, which is very minimal and it's very cost effective, and it's just based on consumption. But you don't have to purchase another user license to use Azure APIM if you want to have custom connectors with Project Oakdale. Now, what happens when an environment or tenant capacity service limits have reached? We looked at our capacity in the admin center and we noticed that some of them are already at 25%. So if I have some heavy data storage and it's going to exceed it, what's going to happen is that it will not allow you to create any more new apps, flows, or chatbots. And then you cannot, and if let's say you exceeded the 1 terabyte capacity, which means that in preview they only have support for 500 environments, and each environment allows only 2 GB of storage. So let's say you've exceeded the 1 terabyte, then what the documentation says that it's going to, existing solutions will continue to work, but certain options like within each solution, say it's whether it's your Power App chatbot or Power Automate, will start getting grayed out and hidden. So that'll be your indication that you've exceeded it. But any of your existing ones will be supported, and that would be a good opportunity for you to start thinking about how you want to true up to a full-fledged CDS environment. Now, can customers purchase additional capacity for environments that have exceeded the default storage that's available? No, I mean currently it only supports 1 million rows per team. So if you have or if you need more capacity, then you will need to either start building it in the CDS environment, or you will have to promote your existing Project Oakdale environments to CDS via the Power Platform Admin Center, which should be available shortly for us to do. Now it sounds like from what I've heard, or from all the documentation that's available, it sounds like the capability to promote is not going to be available in public preview, but it would be available once it's in GA. And a couple of reasons that you would want to keep in mind when you are getting ready to upgrade, or when would you, the good question would be, when would you want to upgrade, right? One other things that you have to keep in mind if you really want to upgrade would be like if you want to do something like enterprise ALM, or you need complex data types, or supports for richer logs and auditing capabilities, or governance, or even if you need like native integration with like Azure SQL and Azure Data Lake, then those are good reasons for you to start looking at promoting to Common Data Service. The last question there I have is, what happens to the environment when the associated team is deleted? So in public preview, this is something that you have to remember. So if your team is deleted, the Project Oakdale environment associated to it is deleted as well. So everything that goes within that storage, be your apps, flows, all of them get wiped out. So that's something you want to remember when you're working on managing your teams in the Project Oakdale environments. So those are some of the FAQs that I curated, but I'm always happy to answer right after I'm done with the session. And just a couple of resources for you here. The Microsoft Docs are a great place to get started on. I mean, most of the times they have the right answers for you. There might be, especially when it's in public preview, there are a couple of things that are still unknown, but just for you to get started with this new set of tools, here are some of the resources that you can use to go read about and then get a better understanding of how licensing works and things like that. And then also we have a bunch of community members. I mean, this is just a few of them that I've listed here. I'm sure there are a bunch of others. All of them over here have videos that talk about how you can build sample apps or flows or chatbots within your teams, and they also talk about how security works and things like that. So be sure to go follow their resources as well. I think that is all I had, and I know we started a little early, so I got to finish a little early, but thank you again for taking the time in joining me today, and I will be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Yes, Geetha, thank you so much for this session. We have a couple of questions from Kiran. The
Sure.
first question talks about, can we map Power Apps to multiple teams at the same time, or only one as we see app development in the context of specific team?
So if you can have your same app used within multiple channels within a single team, but if you want to use the same app across multiple teams, today I don't see an out-of-the-box way to do that. But technically, if you think about it, you could, because you have access to the solution packages that are accessible from the admin center. So I mean, you could. I haven't tried it, but just thinking about it aloud, it feels like you should be able to. Even if not in public preview, I'm sure they'll come up with one for GA.
Okay. The second question talks about can I import a Power App developed in one environment, that's a non-Teams environment, into Teams environment and map to that particular team?
No, you don't want to do that as well. Today, you don't have a way to import it, at least not in public preview, but you don't want to do that because of, how we talked about how the studio is so geared towards using the Fluent UI framework, and it works pretty well with the Teams embedded experience. So unless you have all of those components thought out well within your regular Power Apps, or are you you don't want to do that because all the containers and all the form factor controls all come within the studio. But I see your point in wanting to reuse some of the work that you've already done. Not in public preview, there's not a way to do it, but it would also not be a good idea to do it.
Okay. The third question talks about are PCF controls supported in Power like Project Oakdale Power Apps?
No, so not in public preview. So component libraries are not supported either. So when you go to the studio and if you try to go to the components tab, it helps you create components that are local to the app, but you are not allowed to, you don't have an option to import it, or you don't have an option to use global components.
Okay. The last question here is asked, are the out-of-box connectors that are available in non-Teams environments available for Project Oakdale? We typically table storage as default data source. We typically, yeah.
Trying to understand the question. So are there any examples of the connectors that you're talking about?
Kiran, you want to unmute and then elaborate the question?
Yes, Ankush, thanks for that moderating, and thanks Geetha for that wonderful session. My scenario is about, let's say I have a team and I have a leave Excel sheet that I've been monitoring, and I just want to import that Excel sheet, the leave tracker Excel sheet, instead of
Oh,
developing
yeah, yeah.
a table structure.
Yes,
Yeah.
I know. I think I actually missed showing that. So let me show you that quickly. Let's go back. So you do have access to, you're not limited to just using, let me go back to my home tab here. Let's go back to my demo and I'll open that and I'll just show you how that quick experience is. That's a great question because you're not limited to using just the Project Oakdale as a data source. You can make use of any other data sources that you have, and it works very similar to how you would in the regular studio. And I'll just wait for this to load. As long as it's if it's a premium connector, you just have to be licensed to be able to use it. Or if it's standard connector, yes, you're able to use it. It could be Excel, it could be any sort of data source that you want. So here, right here, you have this option to add a data source, and if you actually expand the connectors, you will see that you have all of your connectors available.
Oh,
So
okay.
you're not limited to using just Project Oakdale. And that's the beauty of this. I mean, it really is like the glue that helps you. It's kind of like your single window to all of these data sources that you want. It still goes with the concept of allowing you to access your favorite data sources.
Yeah, thanks, Geetha. That's great.
No
Because
problem.
all we see is any demo on Project Oakdale in YouTube, everything.
Yeah.
I see it's pinned up from the data table storage, typically.
Yes, because I think that's because it's geared to. I mean, I know even today I was just walking through how to use the environment, but it's a good question. You can use any other data source. Yes.
Any other question we have?
Yep. So there is one about the licensing. So we need to have a Power Apps as a separate license for this, or it comes with the Teams, and we can use the connectors for the others. How it actually
It
works.
comes with your M365 or Teams license, so and which is also tied to your seeded Office 365 plan. So you don't have to have a separate Power Apps license for this because you would be assigned to it as part of your seeded plans or your M365 licenses. So that should just work. I mean, the only time you would need a Power Apps per user or per app license is if you are using premium connectors, let's say Azure SQL or something like that, then you are going to have a license assigned to that role that's creating the app, or even for the user who's going to be consuming it.
Okay. Thank you.
Problem.
Geetha, one question, Kiran here again.
Sure.
In the same context of the licensing, if I go for Microsoft 365 license, right, will I get this project outdoor license both for M3 and M5 as well? Office 365 E3, sorry, E3 and
Yes.
E5 plans.
Yes. Yes. So you just have to make sure that these users are assigned those licenses. I mean, if you actually go to your Office or your Office 365 tenant, admin tenant, you will notice that there is an option to make sure those users have the seeded plans assigned. So as long as they're assigned, which is the default behavior from, unless you have some policies by your admin or IT that doesn't want everybody to be creating apps and things like that. But as by default, it should work as long as you have an M365 license assigned.
Okay. Uh, Thank you. And extending to that, in terms of the licensing and the user personas, just like we do a non-Teams CDS and one of Power Apps. So
Mhm.
there is an app creator and an app user, right? So is that segregation still holds good for this as well, or everyone becomes an app user
So here,
later?
yeah, I mean, it's the security, at least in public preview, it's very, it's not too restricted. So it's just, you are an owner, you're able to create apps. It's kind of governed by your team's core or security around it. So if you're an owner, you can do anything with the apps, and if you're a member, you're allowed to contribute to the apps. So that's how it works.
Yep. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, so again on the licensing, like if a person having the Teams licenses or the M65 license, so is there a limitation in the number of apps he can use or how?
So there is not a limitation on the number of apps. The limitation would translate into the storage capacity that you're using. So you could have, let's say, 100 apps, but what if those 100 apps exceed the 2 GB storage? Or there could be another Teams environment where you just have two apps, and that actually gets you closer to your storage capacity. So it's not really about the number of apps, it's more about the data storage, the size of data storage that's associated to it.
Okay, so the data storage will be consumed by the apps development as well, right? It's not only for the data, it will consume the
Yeah, so that data storage is not just for the apps. It also uses some of the storage for like the artifacts that it provisions behind the scenes. Yes.
okay. Can we use Power Automate or something like this to automate certain of the things over here?
Oh, yes, yeah. So I think that's what we looked at. Let me see if I can, in the build option here, let's go back. I guess I'll have to go back to my teams, so come back here. So you can either go to the FlowMaker portal or go to your environments and pick your team's environment. So the FlowMaker portal, it actually lists your teams, and you can select that, be in the context of within that environment and start building your flows right here. Or you could come to your build tab over here and go to see all, and if you look here, you have an option to build flows, and you can start building flows. And what that does is this opens up your flow experience embedded within Teams. So there are two ways for you to do it.
Okay. So any more queries, guys?
One question here, Geetha. Kiran
Sure.
here. Not sure if this is relevant. If I go for flow and connect to that environment, which is a Teams environment, any restrictions in the type of flows that I can create for a team environment? Only scheduled or everything that is possible in a normal
No, you can
environment?
create. Yeah, I mean, you're not blocked to do anything. I mean, when I'm in a Teams environment right here, and I can actually see all of this. The
Oh,
only difference I see is that here I see all these options, but the only difference I see is I do not see UI flow and a couple of other options when I am within this context over here. So when I go to flow, I only see automated and scheduled.
okay, yeah. And
You're welcome.
Any other questions, team, before we wind up this session? So I don't think so. We have other questions. So thank you so much for joining, everyone. We really appreciate your presence. We hope that you are taking away some new learnings from this session. Thanks a lot, Geetha, for an amazing session and taking out time to share your knowledge with us.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for taking the time joining me today. I'm happy to, and thanks to the Global Bizapps team for running this whole event. And it's been amazing to see this stellar set of speakers and all the variety of content out there. So thanks for giving me the opportunity as well. I'm happy to be here sharing sharing what I've learned.
Thank you so much, Geetha. That was wonderful.
Okay, Geetha. I'll just stop the recording.
Yes. Thank you, Geetha.
Oh, welcome. Very happy.